Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Our guest speaker, Ms. Neha Mehta, has joined us today. And with that, we would like to begin the session. Before that, I would just like to introduce our guest speaker for today. Ms. Neha Mehta is an alumni of Campus Law Center. She began her career as a lawyer and later made a switch to finance and fintech. She has worked in different areas of finance, such as hedge funds, private equity, and venture capital. In 2018, Neha decided to boost the presence of women in the fintech sector and drive financial inclusion for them. And she hence set up her own consultancy firm, founding FemTech Partners, to create a platform to give women the impetus to come forward and work in the fintech sector. She's a very influential person. Some of her key career highlights include being the team leader for the pound 1.2 billion Prosperity Fund for Southeast Asia, working in Pexera Global along with BlackRock on social challenge and financial inclusion for migrant workers and foreign domestic workers, and founding the ASEAN Women in Payments Network. She was one of Singapore's 100 Women in Tech 2020, one of Asia's 50 most influential women in renewable energy 2020, and featured in FinTech 50 2019. It is a pleasure to have her here today, and I would now like to invite our teacher convener, Dr. Ruchita Chakrabarti, to please extend a warm welcome to her.
Hello, Ms. Neha Mehta. First of all, I would like to extend my heartiest welcome to you on behalf of the Placement Assistance Council, Campus Law Center. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and agreeing to interact with the students. Fintech law, as we all know, is really developing, and in India also we're looking forward towards newer laws and applicability of the laws in further aspects. So as such, I'm sure students are going to enjoy your talk, and I'm sure for the students as well, please take the most that you can make from what Ms. Neha Mehta speaks. uh, Thank you again, Ms. Neha Mehta. Welcome. And I will not take much of your time. We can start the sessions, and students are still joining, as we can see. So I hand over the platform to you now. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Ruchita. Thank you, alumna, for the nice, warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be here today. I wish we could do this in person because it's been a while since I've been to Faculty of Law campus and
No,
have been.
we will arrange something. If you remain in India, then and we start physical classes. Hopefully, we do that. All of us are really waiting for being in the campus again. So, in case you stay here, I would personally invite you. I would be very happy, and I'm sure students are. They'll also be very happy to meet you in person.
Thank you, Ruchita. That's very kind of you. And it's a great delight to be here today because it reminds me of my early days being a student and kind of hustling. I still remember in those days I was working part time and then coming to college. I was juggling between few roles, and I think when I look back, it feels like it has paid off. And I'm sure it's been interesting times for all of you, right? Making the switch from offline to online, and also trying to find work, internship opportunities. So it's been a challenging time for most of us, but I'm sure we are making the most of it. And as we wrap up 2021, there's so much more to look forward to and being grateful about. Thank you. So I think at this stage, maybe we can also introduce the moderator for today's session, Tane. Tane, are you around?
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
Wonderful. So Tane works with me at FemTech Partners, and maybe I will pass the ball to you and you can get the ball rolling. Over to you, Tane.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone to Career in Fintech Laws. It's really a great pleasure to have you here. And let me just share with you the format which we will be following today. So we will have a 30-minute discussion with Ms. Neha Mehta herself. So I'll be asking her some questions about her journey, about fintech laws, about some challenges she has faced, and some advice she has for all of you in this call today. And after which she'll be responding to certain questions in the chat box, which she'll be happily ready to answer. So at any point during the webinar itself, you could just unmute. You can type your questions, in the chat box, and Ms. Neha Mehta will answer them once the 30-minute chat is over. So let me, without wasting any more time, let me just begin and start the ball rolling. So Miss Neha, um, it's we have just had a sharing from Miss Alakrita about your incredible journey from a lawyer, then you entered fintech, and you have you are a remarkable woman in the fintech industry today. So would you mind sharing with us about your journey and what all the challenges that you faced along the way?
Yeah, thank you, Tanay. So I think it will be interesting to make this as a two-way traffic. So feel free to unmute, ask your questions. I'm happy to be interrupted in the middle as well. And I'm sure Tanay will be happy to take your questions as well in the chat box. So as you know, I graduated in 2008 from Faculty of Law, and since then, the kind of person I have experimented my career a fair bit. I think while I was experimenting and making some bold choices, I was absolutely unsure. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss would be overcoming the doubt, because while we are on the journey, on the path to something, we're always critical of ourselves. We're not sure whether we are taking the right opportunities along the way. So it's only when you look back, you can connect the dots and you can look at the big picture. So it's important to be easy on yourself and others. This is the first lesson I learned while I was making a foray into different aspects of financial industry. And interestingly, when I graduated in 2008, we were in a similar time like today. It was global crisis, and there were not enough opportunities in the legal world or corporate world. So I still remember I was very uncertain, and I had this conversation with my father about what could be the next step for myself, because I did some internships with law firms, with high court judges, but I wasn't really sure if I'm going to land a good opportunity in a corporate law firm, right? This is what most of us aspire to do. And the market was bad, and I am the first generation lawyer in the family. It wasn't easy for me. So I thought I might as well go for another round of studies. So I applied for a master's in LLM from Singapore. But then at the same time, I decided to take a break and just travel. And when I decided to travel, I realized that I was able to keep my mind open and explore so many things. So finally, when I landed in Singapore, and I decided to just reach out to all the law firms. So I remember going through the Data Press Yellow Pages. It's the directory that you get in the old days. And there was no Google back then. So I compiled a list of law firms I would be reaching out to. And I reached out to all the law firms in Singapore, telling them about my story. And luckily for me, I had an internship in Singapore. So I think that really helped. And when I reached out to about, 60, 80 law firms in Singapore, 10 of them decided to meet me. And by the end of that coffee meeting, I got 3 job offers. So it was right in the middle of the pandemic, a different kind of economic crisis. And then I remember 2009, it was somewhere in Jan, I moved to Singapore. So the second lesson I learned in my life was all about knocking on the doors, because if you don't knock on the door, the answer will always be a no. So it's only when you knock, you try, the answer could be a yes. So it's all about trying. This is the second lesson I learned. And the third would be never say never, because once I started working in a law firm, I realized this is not my true passion or true calling. I want more from it. So I decided to experiment with other fields in finance, in hedge funds, private equity, venture capital. And I realized that I have a short attention span. And I'm sure the team who's joined in today, a couple of my team members are also on this call, they would understand this as well. So given the kind of attention span I have, I decided to work on multiple things to really understand what fancies my attention and the kind of stuff I want to do. So I think you always should try to play on your strength, because that's where the real magic is. Because if you continue to work on your problem areas, you never really know how long it's going to take. So it's better to sell what you're good at. And now that we are in this difficult situation, job-wise, economic crisis-wise, I think it's equally important to upskill yourself and try out different things. Not only fintech, but it could be working in a startup, it could be working with the regulators, doing advocacy work. There's so much a lawyer can do, because I remember when I was a fresh graduate from law faculty, I thought this is it, either a litigator or working in a corporate law firm. But now when I look back, I feel world is my oyster. I could have experimented with so many things. So never think of yourself being stuck in a straight jacket, because it's truly about opening your mind and then just going out and experimenting with different things, because I think the limitation lives in the mind, not in reality.
Thank you for your answer, ma'am. One thing really stood out to me is that once you have reflected after going through this journey, that you have made the pivot from a lawyer to and one of the titans in fintech. The thing is, you really enjoyed this change. You have experimented for a long time, and after making this change, you really have thought over it. You really made it with great deliberation. And although you were experimenting at certain stages in your career, you still never regretted it. And you really, with your go-get-it attitude, you were really able to, um, get over the challenges that were facing you. And with the support of your family, you were able to get over the hurdles and make a career in fintech. So my next question to you would be, could you share with us a specific experience in the fintech industry and just after you entered the fintech industry after being a lawyer? So in this context of fintech law, after you left, after you joined the fintech industry, what is an experience that you recall fondly to this day, and would you like to share with us about it?
Thanks, Sunny. You're very kind to say that it was something coming out of deliberation, but for most time it was coming out of frustration. I want to be honest, because it's never a hunky-dory or glorious journey. Of course, the awards and the titles make it look fancy, but on most days it's a messy job, and I'm sure you would agree with that. Uh, but I think talking on specific things, there's so many of them, and I'm sure people who are tuned in right now would have a similar experience, that you can actually go back and see, oh, there are certain milestones that really shaped the way you think, or kind of redefined your career. But for me, essentially, it has been situations where I felt inadequate. And when I felt inadequate, I think I was forced to look within myself to understand my real power. And this is coming from a place where I just decided to make the pivot into working in the fintech space. And trust you me, I decided to go from the bottom, because I was working for a fintech startup, and as you know, most of you, that when you're working for a startup, you wear multiple hats, because we cannot afford to have a huge set of people working day in, day out. So there are days when you are working as a lawyer, and then you're also working as a partnerships lead. You're also doing business development. So I was doing a plethora of things for them. And that's when I really understood the value of being a hustler or juggler, because it's good to have a specialization. But the minute you want to be an entrepreneur or do something for yourself, you cannot be just good in one aspect and claim to sit in comfort saying that this is what I'm good at, so deal with it. Because I think once you become an entrepreneur, you automatically have to be a good leader, a good communicator. You have to be good with human relationships, interpersonal relationships. And I remember this particular incident when I was working with my boss, and this person was constantly trying to steal the speaking opportunities I was getting. And back then, this was 2016, 2017, my early days of just finding my feet into this new industry. So whatever opportunities were coming my way, I really wanted to grab them. And I realized that I work for a boss who doesn't really believe in equality, who doesn't really believe in giving credit. And at that point of time, I realized that if and when I decide to be an entrepreneur, I'll make sure that I prepare a level playing field for women, and I want to bring more women working in the tech space so that we can amplify world's 50% point of view. So I think that was the day I realized that we need more and more women in the fintech space, because if you look at the stats, only 2% of venture capital funding goes to women. And we don't really get to see their side of the story. Most of the ventures are led by male founders. So we got to really understand the psyche of women, and we might need products which are more focused on female investors. So I think the change is happening, but for me, that day was a turning point in terms of making that realization really strong in my head. Also because of the upbringing I have, I grew up in Delhi. I was studying here, so for me, it was very important to be really out there and use my voice for a good reason. And the other incident that really changed my life would be the fact that I was chosen as a scholar by the UK government. It is the Chevening Scholarship, and that scholarship really opened doors for me because I got the opportunity to study in London at King's College. And since then, I have seen that the kind of experience I gained by studying there, by interacting with the regulators and the industry, it opened perspectives for me, and it made me realize that there's a different market outside of Asia, because I was always working in Singapore and India. And that's when I realized that there's so much potential for myself, even geographically. And then I think experiencing different cultures, people, and new learnings helped me be a better person as well. So I'm sure all of us are itching to travel, but it's also important for all the lawyers or would-be lawyers in the crowd to actually take up opportunities outside of India, because the kind of experience and the melting point of culture that you will see in different countries will really shape the person you are in the long run.
That is a really inspiring answer. Something you said really resonated with me. You mentioned that we have to amplify 50% of the world's voices. And this is not just for the sake of gender equity or gender equality. You're actually giving women the chance to hear their perspectives. You're amplifying their voices. So it isn't just that, okay, we want gender equality and we are doing it just for the sake of it and we're empowering them. You are giving women the chance to get their voices heard. You're giving women the chance to get their perspectives heard. And I think you are doing that really amazingly well with your new venture, FemTech Partners. And the pivot from a lawyer to someone in the fintech industry, I think that has turned out really well for you. So my next question will be related to the fintech industry and the fintech laws in general. So based on your experience over the last 10 years, I would say, I'm not really sure about the number, but based on your experience, all the people, all your connections, and all the experience that you have garnered over the past 10 years or so, what is the biggest challenge at the moment facing fintech and fintech laws? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? This is in the context of, a global, we are having a recession right now, we're having the COVID-19 pandemic right now. So in the context of this, where do you think the fintech landscape stands today, fintech laws landscape stands today, and what are some predictions you have for the future?
Thank you. So I think in terms of the world we're living in, I think now more than ever, digital acceleration has happened, and this was mostly by the situation we are living in, not because we wanted to, which is a great thing to happen, because the switch from offline to online for women and people who are unbanked and underbanked has already happened. Now is the time to tap into that, because there are countries and there are sections of society that really leapfrogged. So they never got a chance to actually witness, let's say, a fixed line or a basic mobile phone. They straight went on to using a smart device with a 5G connection. And imagine the kind of opportunities it opens for you. As we know that the internet data is the cheapest in India, because the kind of data packs that you get, the internet data, it's the cheapest because of the competition that was introduced in this market by Geo. And then imagine the kind of opportunities it opens for you, whether you're a first-time entrepreneur or you're a serial entrepreneur. And fintech is at the basis of all this, because when we talk about any kind of business, there's payments involved. And when the element of payments comes in, this is what we have seen in the last year or so, that within the umbrella of fintech, it's the payments and e-commerce space which has really been taking huge progress. And at the same time, the same goes for the VC funding as well. The funding has gone up significantly for these two. But then outside of that, there's edtech, because most of us are doing e-learnings, and this is what we are witnessing right now as well. What's the challenge? I would suspect this to be twofold. First is, while we recognize that data is the new oil, we are also not really sure in terms of how this data is procured, how it's managed, how it's stored. And every country would have a different law for this. So imagine if you're a startup or you're a unicorn working in multiple jurisdictions, it's really important for you to comply with these regulations and make sure that you understand the nuances of it. And the second one for sure would be the cybersecurity threats, because we have seen all these cyber attacks going up significantly in the last year or so. And in the same breath, it's also for the regulators to really have the right frameworks, not only the banks and the financial institutions, but also the payments companies in terms of managing all this data load, because the transactions have gone up significantly and they don't really have the infrastructure to manage this because they never anticipated this kind of growth to happen, right? Because we have an Indian audience right now, I can talk about the phone pay story. The NPCI has played a good role in coming up with UPI transactions, and the UPI transactions just went skyrocket in the last couple of months. So with that story in mind, I think for a regulator, the problem is always about what to do. They are trying to be agile. They're trying to be really understanding what the innovation looks like, but at the same time, they want to protect the investors, the small-time retail investors, and creating that fine line between making sure that innovation thrives and the interest of the investors are protected. It's not an easy job to do for any regulator. I think they are really bound by the different duties and the fiduciary duties of making sure they balance out all of this. So I think a progressive regulator, especially if we talk from the Singapore point of view, like the MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is also the financial regulator and the central bank, because in India we have multitude of regulators, from capital markets to financial regulator to the central bank playing a different role. In Singapore, all of it is combined, which makes the life much more easier. And which truly means that they understand the value of just sitting back and catching up. So they let the innovation thrive. They let the fintechs or the likes of it to actually go out in the market, experiment, have a minimum interaction with the customers. And then once they know the idea has actually taken off, they want to come up with a regulation to define how it actually looks like. So imagine this to be the early days of cryptos where things were very unclear, but Singapore was one of the first regulators to say crypto trading is going to be legal. There's no taxation because the capital gains tax activity, and Singapore doesn't have long-term capital gains. And this is how the licensing and the regime looks like. Compare this to a regulator like India, where there's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm sure people who are tuned in right now, it could be the first time investors in crypto. That's what they say. The millennials and Gen Z are the ones who are investing in cryptos more than ever. I'm sure you're also battling with this noise and you don't know what's going to happen in the winter bill, which is being presented in the parliament. So I think for a regulator, the challenges remain the same. But I think from an investor or an entrepreneur perspective, it's a time where there's a lot of uncertainty, but it's also a time to thrive, because when things are not clear, you can continue being on your journey and building your product, because by the time the market is ready, your product is ready, and off you go. So I think the challenges remain pretty much the same around the globe, but it's also to understand the kind of regulators you're dealing with and how you can be in a market, let's say like Singapore, which is seen as the gateway to Southeast Asia. Because once you have presence in Singapore, it's easier to tap into markets like Thailand, Vietnam, and all these regulators look at you favorably because they know you come from a country which is highly and strictly regulated. Imagine if you say, I've come from a regulated country like India, you will be going through so many checks. But the minute you say Singapore, the guard is down. So I think if you are aiming to be an entrepreneur or starting your career as a lawyer in a fintech space, then Singapore or any open market like Hong Kong, where they're open to have talent from outside, is a good bet.
You seem to be really impressed with the regulators in Singapore.
Absolutely, I'm very, very biased. But having said that, I think India has also made huge progress in terms of being open and receptive to what the industry wants, and the volume is already is in this country, right? You know how the population of India of Singapore compared to Delhi, so there's no comparison there. But of course, when you talk about the volume and the mass population, has to be India and China, hence the big giants of fintech.
Based on that, I would like to ask you a follow-up question. You have worked in Europe, you have worked in the UK. I believe in particular you have worked in India, you have worked in Singapore, and you have worked in the Southeast Asia region. So you have worked in almost one one fourth half the globe. Where do you think is the best place to start a career in fintech regulations and laws? You have had a lot of experience doing this, managing the Global Prosperity Fund, and in all your experiences so far, where do you think is the most conducive environment? It's a environment which provides a lot of opportunities for fintech regulations and laws.
So I would have a two-fold answer for this. The first is a very philosophical answer, which is about you go where your heart desires, and you give your 100%. Because every time I went to a new country to start a career, and I rooted myself from a comfort zone of knowing of a familiar territory to something new, you don't really know what lies on the other side of the fence, but yet you do all that because you want to grow as a human being and you want all this expansive environment. So I think every country and every experience had its own set of advantages, and I wouldn't trade any of those experiences for anything in life. Um, and the second fold a view on this would be the fact that if you are really looking at fintech, you go by the traditional method of looking at which are the financial hubs of the world, right? And not much has changed, unfortunately, despite COVID. So if you look at the financial hubs, the names that pop up in your head would be the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, New York. And then, of course, when you talk about Europe, it could be Amsterdam or India as well when it comes to Bombay. So these are the clear winners. But having said that, in the global market or the village that we live in with internet connection and the kind of ability to work from anywhere, I think this cohort is very lucky because by the time you graduate, the future of work has transitioned into something really brand new. We work in our pajamas. We just change our we just wear a jacket or jumper and we're ready to go for a business meeting. So I think things look very different. So you could pretty much be working for an Irish company while you're living with your mom and dad in India and enjoying all the thrills of home cooked food and whatnot. But if you really want to experience and get the first-hand experience of working with regulators or being in a market which is really thriving, I would go with the clear choices of in Southeast Asia. It's going to be Singapore. It has been a financial hub and also being in competition with Hong Kong for a very long time. But we also know what's happening in Hong Kong, the kind of tiffs they have with China. But nonetheless, it's a great place to work. And then UK, since the Brexit happened, is definitely spending a lot of time and money to be seen as still as the king of the financial hub. But their focus has shifted from fintech to carbon markets now. Since COP26, they are allocating all their budgets on this aspect. But there's still potential because I feel fintech regulations in general and carbon economy, green economy, all these aspects can go hand in hand, and there's a lot we can do there. It's a great area to play around with. And then India, of course, because that's where the huge growth stories are. You see so many unicorns coming from India, the super apps like Paytm and PhonePe. So there is a huge potential in this market as well, because I always feel where things are messy and confusing, that's where you can thrive, because you bring clarity, you bring ease to people because you are the legal minds and the talent of the world. So the minute you come and read into the documents, you can give advice and you can help startups to set up their operations, raise funding, and and reach out to a big customer market like India. So definitely you can start from the home ground and then venture out eventually.
Certainly, certainly. Something you mentioned is really quite a valuable point. You mentioned that nothing much has changed in the financial hubs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I also would like to raise something else, that nothing much has changed in the main players, even due to the rise of fintech. So before, let me just give you an example. We had Reliance, and that Reliance, even though they're a very traditional player, they have been in the field for 50 plus years, they have transitioned to Geo, right? and they have become a really big super app in the context of India. So the financial hubs haven't changed. The traditional players, the main players in the landscape haven't changed. But the main thing that is driving the landscape right now is innovation. And that brings me to my next question. What do you think are some of the biggest innovations in the fintech industry today? And who are the main ones, and how do we drive innovation in the field by bringing more women into the field, or maybe increasing investments for them? So how do we drive innovation in the fintech field?
Right. So, Tane, before I answer your question, I think Karan has raised his hand.
Okay.
Maybe we want to speak to Karan as well, or I'm not sure how you want to.
Hi, Karan, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for attending the session, ma'am. I have a question. Ma'am, as someone who's interested in the synergy of law and economics and finance, and someone who wants to work in the private equity and venture capitalist space, I feel that as a lawyer, I don't want to restrict myself just on the regulatory, on the transactional advisory side of things, but also on the business aspect of things. So my question, I guess, is that how we as lawyers pivot into that specific area. For example, in US, there is a curriculum of JD plus an MBA, which helps people move in that area. Or, for example, so what should be the path? Should it be through an experience, through job, or it should be an additional education, for example, something like a master's in finance or an MBA or that sort of thing?
Thanks, Karan. That's a very good question, and I would answer this question purely basis my experience, and I'm sure if there's any other speaker, they would have a different view on this. So I am a strong believer in learning things on my own, and I have actually picked up a lot about what's happening regulation-wise, or the industry trends, or the developments in the technology world just by pure reading. So I spend a lot of time reading every day. And that goes also to the Tane's question in terms of the innovation that's going to happen in this space, because a lot of it changes so rapidly that what you read 2 weeks back or 2 days back is not going to be valid today. So having worked in the PE and VC space, I can tell you that when I was working in that space, I was purely focusing on the regulatory aspects of it. Was it a fulfilling experience? Yes. But I realized that the legal set of skills that I have, the knowledge that I have as a lawyer, it never goes away, right? No matter what agreement I'm signing today, whatever I'm doing, I will certainly go above and beyond in terms of going into the detail and understanding every nitty-gritty of it. So it's very much possible for you to be constantly on a learning mode. If you cannot afford to take out time for an MBA, I would say that's all right. Just continue to learn more about the industry trends. And imagine if you were to join any of the PE funds in Bangalore, Bombay, or Delhi that are focusing on, let's say, fintech, and you join them as a fund manager. You don't really have a background in finance, but you can definitely, when you're doing a deal, you can help them with due diligence. But at the same time, because you have gathered so much knowledge about, let's say, open banking, APIs, you would be able to tell them more about how things actually work tech-wise as well. Because there are very few people who really understand the tech aspect of the business. I'm not a techie, but I have to take the pain of reading through stuff, Googling it, and spending a lot of time to really understand. And I'm sure Tane will also echo the same sentiment that a lot of stuff that we do involves so many technical aspects that we have to spend time to learn about it. So there's no shortcut to success. So therefore, I would say that even if you get a chance to start off as a lawyer in a fund or in a family office, I would say just take it up because it's a great experience. And if it's a small outfit, I'm sure they will allow you to really move from one department to the other. But if it's a bigger, larger organization, they may have a structure that you have to follow. In that case, it could be a little tricky. But twofold answer. The first is I don't really believe in formal education. This is coming from someone who has done 3 degrees. So you can imagine the kind of damage it has done to me. And the second is just be open about saying yes to opportunities, because most of the times I feel that when I was younger, I was weighing my options so much that I didn't realize that I have a great opportunity in front of me, because I was constantly worried, what if I miss out on that, and that. So I think today, if I had a simple advice to myself, I would say just go with the flow. Just say yes and learn how to do it. This is what Richard Branson also talks about it. And I'm a strong believer in that. just say yes and then figure out how to do it.
Karan, has your question been answered?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karan. Coming back to your question, Tane, I think innovation-wise, there is a lot that's changing as we speak. So especially very simple things like I remember the early days of let's say ventures like Policy Bazaar or Bank Bazaar. We never had the idea of a country like India using a digital ID. And with that ID, which is such a powerful tool right now, a lot of countries are looking at India and how it managed to do it. So something that allows us connection to not only our tax records but also our financial records, and every bit of transaction can actually move within 60 seconds, and a decision can be made whether a loan can be dispersed or not. So a digital ID that actually is connected to all your records and your credit worthiness. I think that's a beautiful step into the right direction, because when you look at women not being able to raise money because they don't really have a collateral, a house in their name. So when they go to a traditional bank, they will never be given a loan because they're not the one who's holding the asset. It could be the father or the husband or the brother. So I think the minute we have a digital ID, a lot of women would be able to come back into the formal financial ecosystem. And at the same time, when we're talking about countries like Estonia, because you were referring to how things have not changed, but they have actually changed. Like no one had heard of Estonia before, but now this little country in Estonia has highest number of startups in the world, because these startups don't really have a physical presence; they have an e-presence there. So you can actually e-register your company in Estonia. You get an e-visa. So effectively, I'm sitting here right now and I can say that I'm an Estonian resident, because on paper, I have a startup there. On paper, I'm a resident there, and I'm filing my taxes and everything online. And it's easy to raise capital by that basis, because startups who are in the Estonian environment, they get a lot of VC traction as well. So coming back to your point, I would say the developments of blockchain that can be used for financial inclusion is something I'm very passionate about, because this is where you can use tech as a force of good for the larger section of the society. We spoke about digital IDs and the fact that you can get alternative sources of credit worthiness. Gone are the days when you will actually look at the data, which is the normal set of data coming from the banks and from your credit card company. Now you can look at the social engagement, how all this alternative set of data points are collected, so that they can understand whether you're the right person or you're the person worthy of this loan or not. So I think that kind of data and with the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to really help us understand the data very quickly and come at decisions very quickly as well. So the process of going from wanting something to having it has really shortened, because we know buy now pay later, maybe most of us are using that in India as well now, BNPL. So there is no scope of moving your gratification to later. We want instant gratification, and that's possible purely by the means of innovation, whether it's through robotic processes, through machine learning, or through the fact that we're doing something for women which is impactful, which is going to have a better society, but that may take some time. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
You have spoken about a number of innovations, be it alternative credit scoring, be it cryptocurrency, be it BNPL. But as a follow-up question, is there a viable way to integrate women into the financial ecosystem? Because it has been done. Women have been slowly trying to be slowly being integrated into the system, but it's a really slow process because there are many factors which is hindering them. One being their family, two being their commitments, and there are many factors such as this which is stopping them from being integrated into the financial ecosystem. So do you think specifically, are there some innovations that could be made to integrate women into the financial ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tane. I will answer that. I believe there's a question coming from Muhammad
Yeah.
as well.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing me this. So my question is regarding it is a practical question I came across during my one of the internship experience. So this question is regarding the private equity fund and the regulation that we have FDI press note on last March, April, that whenever we are accepting any FDIs from our foreign neighbor countries, we'll have to take a government permission. But my doubt is regarding, consider a situation where a private equity fund which is registered in UK, at the same time they have their partner who is citizen from China. So should we consider the citizenship of that partner to be a fact to get this permission, or will the registered, it is a registered entity in UK? So I got the situation, and so since you are in a kind of expert in this field, so I thought I'll ask.
Okay, thanks for your question, Mohammed. So you said the firm is based in the UK, and
Yes.
what is the exposure to the Indian market?
No, they are intending to invest their private equity fund in India. So they are intending to invest in India.
Okay, so that means the fund will be domiciled in India?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, and then your question is specific to the partner who's based in the UK, but is a Chinese national.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah. So with regard to that FDI guideline that which recently got even controversial also, because that it is an arbitrary in nature, that all these neighbor countries specifically need to take permissions while taking this FDI. So it is kind of triggered after our COVID kind of relation with China and all. It got in written that way also. People got
Sure.
so yeah.
I know which situation you're referring to. Yes.
Yes.
So I think the very fact that this company is headquartered in the UK and the fund will be domiciled in India, of course, they will have to comply with the regulation, which is pertaining to the compliance and the permission that they need to take when it comes to setting up the operations. Now, whether it's about the person's nationality, I think it also goes to check whether this person is actually a permanent resident or a similar kind of term that is being used in the UK. Because if that is the case, then of course, what is being held for a UK national can be hold true for this gentleman as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So, like for instance, I'm still an Indian citizen, but I'm a Singapore PR, which means that when it comes to a lot of regulations, I am able to go by what is applicable for a Singapore PR than for an international. So I choose where it's more suitable for me rather than going for the poor choice of being an Indian citizen sometimes.
Ma'am, with regard the same doubt, I'm still have that confusion with regard to which part will be considered, whether the partner will be specifically looked into, or the entity's nature of this entity. I mean, the entity is incorporated in UK and the partner is from China. So,
So, okay, the first step definitely will be the entity. So the entity is coming from the UK, and the laws would be specific to what they want it to be with respect to the UK.
yes,
This is the
ma'am.
first step. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
then clarified. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your
Thank you. I see Mayank also raised his hand.
Yeah.
Hi, Mayank.
Hi, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, my question is based on, ma'am, what will you advise, looking at the new age tech firms, which are also known as growing firms, and they are being listed in Indian markets. But when we see that after the listing, there's a huge drop of prices. So what do you think, ma'am? What SEBI would be coming up with new regulations, or how the Indian markets would look at these firms, ma'am, with respect to the, ma'am, regulations to regulatory bodies as well?
Okay, Mayank, just to be clear, you're talking about the IPOs by listing, and you're referring to IPOs like Zomato, Nykaa, and Paytm. Is it what your question is about?
Exactly, ma'am.
Okay, and your question is because the valuation has been crazy, is SEBI going to step in and fix the situation?
Exactly, ma'am. Appropriate pricing is going to be one of the major issues, ma'am, these days.
Okay, so I think the first part of the question, first part of the answer would purely be the fact that the valuation has been crazy. That's a fact. Because if you look at the balance sheet of Zomato, they are still in negative So is Paytm. It's only Nykaa which has been profitable for some time, but the profits dipped significantly during COVID period. So the valuation aspect is true, but having said that, the money that's being pumped into these startups, no longer startups, but unicorns, has been coming from sources which we all know: SoftBank, Alibaba Group. Jack Ma has been supporting these ventures as well. So which means that they have this huge set of investments coming in and being pumped into the system, and then definitely they may quote an exciting price, but at the same time the demand and supply feature plays in, the simple economics of it comes into play, and we see what happened with Paytm. The anchor investor left, and it was not the best IPO that they were envisioning to have. I'm not really sure how SEBI is going to play a role into this, whether they really want to step in and take a call on the situation, because there is no public announcement, and I'm not privy to what kind of discussions are happening within SEBI on this in this regard. But I would certainly assume that they, from time to time, given the kind of influence that he has in terms of making sure that the investor protection takes place, and they're also coming up with campaigns where they want to tell people how the IPO works and what's the mechanism for them to really understand the profitability or the pipeline of these ventures. So I'm sure they will come up with clear guidelines, but I won't. I don't think they will go to the extent of saying this is how the valuation looks like, and they will make a comment on it right before the IPO happens. I think that would be too much playing into their area. So as a regulator, they are more concerned about the market protection, which is what they will be looking at.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayank.
Does anyone else have any other questions at this point? Then we can move on with the questions. Udija has a question.
I actually knew that there's going to be a crypto question for sure. How's it going to affect? Okay, so the question is, how's the ban going to affect the fintech industry? Right. So I think we are still some days away in terms of having a very set of guidelines of clarity in terms of where we stand. But we have been, oscillating in the situation of whether it's legal or not legal. All this has been happening, but I strongly believe that the industry in itself, they really understand where the regulator is coming from and their territory and their sort of pain points and concerns. But when we talk about the investors, and stats go to show that in the last year, 70% of the retail investors in the crypto space are millennials and Gen Z. So it's pretty much so many of you around. I truly believe that this is a time when you have to be very careful. Just to give an example, I'm sure you know of Binance. It has a huge presence worldwide, and very recently they have been told by the Singapore MAS, the regulator, to look into their affairs when it comes to compliance, AML, and KYC. And because of that reason, the speculation is that they might leave the country and they wrap up the operations. So crypto, as we know, is a space where a single tweet by Elon Musk can drop the prices or take the price skyrocket. So I think at the end of the day, it's about your own due diligence. It's all about your own sort of research that you do, and play safe, because the regulator can step in. But at the same time, if you go outside and do crazy things when you're putting all your eggs in the same basket, you can be in trouble. So I'm not sure whether the fintech industry, with the industry itself, the stakeholders at large, I think they are going to be okay. But the retail investors have to be very careful. Chavi, you have a question? And Muhammad, you also have a question?
Hi, ma'am. I wanted to know your view on the SEBI's proposed regulatory framework for algo-based retail traders.
Algo trading?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, so algo trading, I think, is a concept which has been around for a very long time. It is just that it's coming to an extent of we saying that our decision-making process has been delegated to the extent we can be a passive investor and let the robot or the algo decide for us, right? And that's where the trickiness comes, and that's where they want to make sure that the investor protection is there. If I were to comment in terms of how it actually looks from a retail perspective, I think it brings a lot of ease and efficiency, and you don't really have to have a huge knowledge, right? Because the machine learning aspect of it takes care of it. But as a regulator, I'm sure SEBI would be concerned because when it comes to trading, the split second can make a lot of difference. And if there are all these algo softwares which are playing in the background and doing and booking the trades, they really want to make sure that sometimes we have seen how our markets crash because they cannot take the because we don't have that much of infrastructure to the load. So I think from a SEBI perspective, they really want to make sure that they are able to come up with a regulation which really goes also with the infrastructure we have in the country right now. So I set up the India operations for Eurex, the German exchange, in 2012. And I still remember we had discussions with SEBI, RBI, because we were hoping to take 5% stake in BSE, which we eventually took. But I think from a SEBI perspective, I'm not sure where things stand right now. I've not been in the loop for a very long time. But as a regulator, I think they're more concerned to really make sure that the retail investors are safe.
Could Shatika has
Ma'am, one more question. I wanted to understand the impact on this API enables broker startups basically. What would be the legal impact and what would be their future?
Can you repeat the question? API?
Ma'am, what would be the impact of this if this regulation comes in the picture? What would be the impact on the startups who provide, algo trade uh, services?
Right. So, to give an example, right now in Singapore, it's a licensed business because Singapore is very much ahead of it. So, to give an example and put things into perspective, um, like the way we have a provident fund in India, we have a central provident fund which is called the CPF. And as a permanent resident, I make a contribution, or as a citizen as well, the employer and the employee both make that contribution. So basically, this is the money that's parked with the central bank or the authorities. Now they invest the money for you, and at the time of retirement, you get it, in a monthly installments. Now the fact that we have in the market, we have got all these robo advisors and algo traders that allow us to be using our money, which was actually parked in CPF until we hit the age of 60, to use that money because these are licensed entities. So I think it's good for the market because not all of us have the time and we really understand the financial nuances of the business. So it is going to be interesting times because it's going to disrupt the market a lot. Because if you know, the wealth management space has been ruled by banks and is only available to high net worth individuals. It's only when you have a certain ticket size, let's say 2 million or more than that. Only then a relationship manager will entertain you because these are the fancy looking guys who are dressed up and they give you good piece of advice. But gone are the days that you actually need to be a huge investor to be making those investments. And that also takes me to the example of Grab, which is a taxi hailing service similar to Ola and Uber in our part of the world. They have a Grab Invest feature, which lets you invest with just $1. So imagine if you're a student and you have just about $300, you can start investing with that money as well, but not just in a specific sort of category. It opens the avenue for you market wide. So you can do cryptos, debt, ETFs, REIT, equities. There's so much that's available to you. So I think it's going to be a good innovation and the disruption in the fintech space. And with the open APIs, like you were saying, it basically means that it's possible to share the data from one end to the other. Simple words, application program interface. So it's going to be it's already being used from the banks in an open banking environment. But if it happens in a robotic form, I think it's a great development.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shavi.
could Shatika, you had a question?
Hello, ma'am. It's Kujotika this side. Good evening. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. The session has been very, very insightful, and your journey is in it very inspirational. So the question which I had in mind is, how can fintech laws be an asset for helping India achieve its goal of becoming the third largest economy by 2030?
So I think I will answer the question in two parts. The first is there is no such term as fintech law. So when this was given as the title for this topic, I was baffled for a bit, not to upset the organizers. I'm sorry, but so far we have not seen the term fintech laws ever. Of course, you're qualified to say them fintech laws because you're talking about a fintech industry and then the regulation of it. But there's no clarity in terms of what really comes under the umbrella of fintech laws. And the second being, when we talk about fintech, we're talking about the redesigned banking, we're talking about Web 3.0, we're talking about all these startups and payment firms, e-commerce, all of them really redefining and reshaping our experience of doing work, making payments, getting money. So basically, the journey of sending, spending, and lending has been changed drastically. How is it going to be for India? I think I briefly mentioned this in the earlier part of the presentation that we are a huge economy, a huge country. So, for all you know, maybe we are ahead of China in terms of our population. But it also means that when we say the demographics of the country, 60% of us are between the age of 20 to 25, and that's where the big chunk of disposable income is going to come from. The data has been the cheapest around the world, and we have access to 5G connection, we have access to smartphones. So we have the right infrastructure, but let's look at fintech in general. For fintech to thrive, we need the regulation, we need the infrastructure, we need the talent and the capital. So where do we stand in terms of the talent and capital? That's a key question because without talent, without people, we cannot execute our ideas. So right now, if Tane is doing this for me, he's part of my team, he will go back and work extra hard, right, Tane? So we need people to do this for us. We need capital. We need investors to back us, to give us money to do this day in, day out. So fintech laws are great, but I think RBI and SEBI have been sluggish in certain aspects, and they have been great when it comes to NPCI payments. Everyone looks at India for two things in the fintech space: digital ID and the payment space, and the journey of super apps like Paytm. So I think there's a huge ability for us to really make it happen. But when it comes to clarity and consistency, which is not there with some of our regulators. And I remember working in India with the Private Equity Association from 2012 to 2014. And this is the same time, I'm not sure if you guys are even aware of GAR, the General Anti-Avoidance Rule, which was applicable to Vodafone. And that was a big hurdle to a lot of investors. They were scared of getting into a country like India because they thought, what if we invest and tomorrow the law changes? What if it's something new with a high court judgment? So if investors are sitting on the edge, they're scared of entering a country, the country will never thrive. So I think more than laws, we also need a stable environment for the startups to thrive and for investors and people to feel comfortable to do business in. So I think it's going to be a long shot, but knowing India, it can do it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That answers my question.
Thank you. Lovely.
Okay, we can answer Arun's question next in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. Thanks for that comment, Arun. I'm trying to struggle to understand. What is the question there?
Ma'am, just wanted to know your view about it. Is it possible to stop these guys for some time from
Yeah.
dumping the shares just after listing?
I think that will be wonderful, right? If that actually happens, because that will definitely mean that most of us are not in for a shock, right? But I'm not sure how soon and how quickly this can happen because we are dealing with multiple regulators here. We're dealing with SEBI, and then when it comes to the capital markets, when it comes to the insurance sector, they are bringing in all the strings. So I'm not really sure how soon and quickly this can happen, but this could be on our wish list for Christmas for sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We can answer Lija's questions next.
Yeah.
Lijas, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. So my question is regarding SPAC, special purpose acquisition companies, which are like which is not permissible in India with regard to our shell company prohibition as per our Companies Act. So recently there is a news that Byju's even is going to are intending to go public in US through this SPAC way. So my doubt was regarding this is not doubt. I'm asking for your opinion, like how as it is actually impacting that such prohibitions that is pertaining in our company law, like despite this pack is being a hit as of now in US market as of now, what I understand, we are still lagging behind far. So what do you think, like we are still how is it costing our environment reaping out the actual benefit to how it is in global market as of now?
Thank you, Mohammed, and hats off to you for keeping track of the global
Thank
news
you,
and
ma'am.
having an opinion there. So, if you have been following news, you would be aware that Grab, a company from Singapore, started as a taxi hailing service, and now they are a super app. They recently got listed on Nasdaq through the SPAC route, and they have had the largest IPO ever by a Southeast Asian company. So you can understand the potential there. And I would just take 2 minutes to talk about their journey, the founder's journey. They were two young kids in Harvard, and the girl was always finding it difficult to get home because she's from Malaysia. And I think most of the girls in this cohort will also understand how tricky it is to be traveling home when you are, in a country like India or Malaysia, any developing market. So that's where the idea of starting the business came from. So the journey has been inspirational. And this is how I think the future would look like. People who have been great at delivering their promises, they know the market gap, they're coming up with a product which really resonates with the larger public. I think they deserve every chance in the world to raise the money and the funding to go even higher and bigger. So it has been a great story for Baiju as well, like you said, and for Grab. So I think uh, for most parts, I have seen India playing a catch up. So I think maybe they would have enough time to see the good and the bad, the plus and the minuses, and then come up with something solid. So the waiting game could be a bit longer, but also I think we're in good hands because we should also keep in mind what happened with the Alibaba group. They went to the US just before days of the IPO. They had to take a U-turn on that decision, also because of the political instability in China, and then ultimately going back to square one very recently, right? So I think it may take a while for this to actually making a foray into India, but as and when it happens, I'm sure by then we have also made our learnings from all the pitfalls and the success that we are celebrating right now.
Can I now please request the audience to post their questions towards the end so that ma'am and Tanya can conclude their two-way interaction?
Okay, great.
Ma'am, would you like to answer one last question before we end off? Or
Yes, please.
okay.
Definitely.
So it's a question by Surya in the chat. So how would the government regulate cryptocurrency given the inherent nature of cryptocurrency is based on anonymity and privacy?
That's a great question, Surya. Thank you. So I think just by looking at any progressive regulator around the world, and looking also at countries that have recognized Bitcoin because it's the digital gold or the biggest cryptocurrency ever to be seen as a legal tender. So I think the potential of blockchain as a technology is here to stay because of its efficiency, transparency, immutability. We know all the fun of blockchain. Now coming on to the trading aspect of it, and this whole asset class being so speculative that digital assets scare us, we get sleepless night because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I think it just boils down to giving a minimum bare level of protection, whether it comes to making sure that the players in the market are licensed and they're following the rules when it comes to the knowing your customer, following the anti-money laundering laws, and making sure that this is not black money which is getting to the system. This is where a regulator is coming from. because for them, these are the big areas of concern and also making sure that the investor money is safe. But having said that, there's very little they can do when it comes to players which are not recognized. And we as retail investors sign up on those platforms which are outside the purview of these regulators, and they're not complying with the regulation in terms of going by the license, following the regulation. And if we don't do our due diligence, we cannot really pass the buck, right? That's true for any part of investment and any digital or normal fiat investments that we can do. So I think as a regulator, India, or you may look at any other jurisdiction as well, they're always trying to make sure that they give out everything very clear in black and white. But there are always players which are popping up from nowhere, because I do a lot of work in Vietnam. And when it comes to peer-to-peer lending, we're trying to see how we can block Chinese players to enter in this market, because they enter the market, they charge high rates, and they just disappear. So this is how the market has been. And I think it's the same with any emerging market. We have the same set of struggles. So hopefully, as and when we have clarity in terms of what the regulators want to do in India, it will never come to the stage where everything is taken care of and we can sit back and relax and invest into every asset class and feel comfortable. That's never going to happen, because there's inherent risk when it comes to this kind of investing. Yeah.
I think the question has been adequately answered. So, as to wrap up in a conclusion, I would like to pose you one last question. So, what is one advice you would give all of our fellow talented lawyers right here, fellow budding lawyers right here? What is one advice you would give them to pursue a career in fintech regulations?
So I think the piece of advice, whether it's fintech or outside of fintech, it could be whether you want to work as a judge or do anything in life, it is just about taking the leap of faith. Because when you're scared, when you're having a bad day, when you are living in doubt, just remind yourself that you have done a lot, you have come a long way, and this too you shall overcome. So I think all of us should wrap up this year with that sentiment that we are capable of doing a lot. We may not see ourselves in all our beauty and glory, but we should often remind ourselves of what we are capable of doing and how much we have achieved so far. So you're studying in one of the finest law colleges in India. I take a lot of pride being an alumni of Faculty of Law, and I think you should also, because the competition is really intense. And it has not been easy for you to do all this e-learning, but if you can do this much, you can also do a lot in life. So never put any limitation on your goals or dreams, and never let anyone tell you this is not possible, because you decide for yourself what is possible. So I really hope this has been a great session for you, and I would very much look forward to staying in touch. I will drop my email address. You can find me on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, or if you'd like to stay in touch, very happy to do that. Thank you, Tanay.
That was really well put. I'll pass the time over to Alankrita if she has some final comments.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If there are any more questions, we would love to entertain them now. Please post your queries in the chat box.
Ma'am, we had received some questions when the students had filled in the registration. So if you would like to answer a few from them.
Sure, yeah.
So one of the questions was, what measures do you consider are essential for India to improvise the irregularities in regulatory compliance with financial sector?
So could you repeat the question? What
measures do you consider are essential for India to improvise the irregularities in regulatory compliances within the financial sector?
Right. So I think when it comes to the financial sector, there is a lot of emphasis on how it really works from end to end, whether it's onboarding of the customer and managing their money, or just doing the financial transaction, and the compliance part of it. So I think if we break down this journey into the three aspects, then it has to be a clarity in terms of how the KYC is done, and if we can actually do an eKYC, and we have done that with how Kotak Bank is doing a video selfie, which is an eKYC process. In a similar fashion, how we can come up with regulations which really streamline the process for us to understand, and then how the data is stored, measured, and taken care of, because now we have all these cloud computation and cloud sources, softwares as well, AWS, Microsoft, Google is also in space. So what are the regulations? Because sometimes I think the industry is grappling to understand the regulation aspect of it. So the minute we can clarify or put it in clear terms, it becomes easier for them to know, okay, this is the area I can play within. And then the end part of it would be the compliance, which would also bring the element of reg tech, soup tech. So the ability of using technology for regulatory compliances, for supervisory work. And I think a lot of regulators around the world have managed to use tech component of it, and they have come up with regulations. So it is about time that India also does that. I think we are on the right track. We have made some progress there, but if we can really come up with defined regulations in each of these different things that I just discussed about, that's going to be very useful. So I
Thank you
think,
for answering that, ma'am. I think Hardik here has
Yes,
a
a
question.
very good
Yeah.
evening, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question with regard to there has been a widespread concern over the misuse of data in today's era. There have been a lot of tech giants who have been misusing the data. So, how can such special laws be created so that a self-regulatory mechanism overleaps over the negative outcome that emerges out from these widespread misuse of data? So what could be that regulatory mechanism that you would like to enlighten us with?
yeah, thanks, Hardik. I think that's a very important question because we see data as something that we all are fighting over, and the fact that every company, whether it's WhatsApp, Facebook, they have been tech giants in their own space. Whether it's Google, they can very much just sit on their back and enjoy the laurels and the success, but they decide to venture into the payment space. Why? Because that's where the data lies, and that's where you can come up with the consumer behavior predictions and use it to offer them something better. So personalization of the data and how the data can be used in a better fashion to give them the right set of offers and goods. So specifically in India, it falls under the IT Act, as you know, but we are also looking at having a specific set of regulation when it comes to identifying how this data is gathered, stored, and used, and where the consent has been given. Because as you know, every time we download an app, we have to agree and give consent whether we want it or not, right? For the heck of it, everything is being taken from us. And the minute we say no, we are not allowed to use the app. So EU has been at the forefront, as you may know. They came up with GDPR, the General Data Protection Laws, and they actually lay out very stringent measures. And if you fail to comply with them, there are strict penalties around it. But they also have a very beautiful thing of a data compliance officer, which is an individual that really takes care of how the data is coming into the organization, how it's stored, and how it's being used. And every time you actually access an EU firm sitting in India, you've got to comply with their cookies and accept their conditions and give your consent for your data to be used. So I think this is where we are coming into an era where people are very scared of the data, because I have friends in Germany, in Switzerland, they choose not to have presence on Facebook, Gmail, Instagram, because they're scared that data will be stolen. So I think the realization is there, and of course we're getting there. The aspect where we typically fail is the execution part of it. You made a great comment in terms of having an SRO model. I think it sounds great in principle, but is it really possible to make sure it really works? I think that's a challenge, because a lot of us would be able to manage it really well, but most of the times it doesn't really go well, even in a very strictly regulated country like Singapore, because when it boils down to an individual and organization, they may not really do a great job of coming up with the right compliance measures there. So I think hopefully India would have a clear set of regulations in this aspect. and make sure that everything goes well.
Thank you for your answer, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hardik.
Kujotika has raised a hand, and Mohammed Ijaz has asked if he can ask one more question, ma'am. Would
Okay,
that
sure.
be okay with you?
Yes, we take these last two questions and then we wrap up because I have another appointment right after.
Right.
Hi, ma'am. So sorry to take your time. So the question which I had is, I know that you've already mentioned that it's not necessary to have a particular degree in the fintech industry itself in order to make a career in that. But would you still suggest some courses which one can opt for along with or after LLB to carve out a career in the fintech industry, that is?
Thank you. So I think most of the courses I'm aware of would be focusing on the tech aspect of it. And I am myself a trainer with University College London and SPJN. I do a lot of fintech modules there. But besides that, I also teach I have courses available at Udemy. So if you want, I can send you the link of those courses. There are organizations who are running these courses. It could be a 6-week module, but it's all online. I'm not really sure how it actually works once you graduate from their institution, whether a job is guaranteed or not. I'm not aware of all that, but I think those could be a good avenue for you to explore because they have been in the market for some time and they really help you understand the entire journey of finance evolving into fintech to the current date of where payments stand and what the regulations are country specific. So I do a course which is called the ASEAN FinTech Regulation, where I encapsulate all the 10 countries in ASEAN and their fintech specific regulation. I'll be more than happy to send you those details if you really want to embark on that journey.
Yes, ma'am, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for the information. I will drop a mail perhaps.
Yes, please. Sounds good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for allowing my one last question. So this is regarding that you have mentioned regarding GDPR. So incidentally, I've been following the recent revised our data protection bill, which has been tabled in our parliament after the joint parliamentary report. So once I have noticed, I mean, I just had an incident comparing our GDPR and our the current draft data protection bill of India. What I found was that our any entity of a foreign who is already GDPR compliant would require to be more legally compliant for all these requirements which is mentioned in our PDP, our data protection bill. So I feel like entities coming from outside would be more restricted considering our new data protection. So I would like to know what would be your opinion about on the same, considering the new bill is coming and the data protection compliances are being asked.
Right. So I think, Mohammed, this is a step in the right direction, as you may agree, because every time we are giving away the data, of course, we get something in return, but whether it's really worth it. And also, if you look at the journey of super apps, there are 6 super apps in the world right now. And by super apps, I mean an app like Paytm that allows you to do multitude of things. And I know so much about this because I'm writing a book on super apps now. We see all the super apps, Alipay, WeChat, Grab, coming from the Eastern market, but there's not even a single one coming from the Western market. Now, the question is, why does that happen? It's purely because A, people don't want to share the data, and B, the data protection laws are so strict that it is never shared to the extent where it is used to redefine the customer experience. So clearly, you see a lot of developments in the data protection happening in Europe and in the Western world. And most of the regulators here are just about learning from that aspect. Now, whether the question is how it's going to look like in the future, this is my outlook. I think very soon we would have some sort of commonality, because now, when you enter a new market, let's say if you're entering from Singapore to India or vice versa, you have to quickly run through all the data protection act and laws and understand what really works for you in this market versus that market. But the kind of global market we are capturing, I think very soon we would have a certain set of regulations or guidelines which are going to be applicable, at least in the ASEAN bloc, the way it works in EU. So I think if that happens, it's going to simplify the lives of so many people and entities that are operating in multiple markets. So my feeling is that right now, yes, every country is busy defining their laws, but very soon we will come to a stage where we are able to have a common level in terms of this is what is required for a lot of firms to do, at least in this part of the world. So set of common directions or guidelines will be coming up soon.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your insights and specifically your view on that East versus West. That was insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So I think I may have to drop off at this stage because I have something else coming up. But I really thank you all for your time. It has been a pleasure interacting with you. And here's wishing everyone all the best because you have some interesting years of your life coming up very soon where you will be experimenting and being adventurous, not only when you're traveling, but also in your career. So all the best for that. And I have dropped my email address in case you're in touch.
Ma'am, if you could stay back for 1 minute, my fellow convener Mayank, he would like to do the vote of thanks.
Okay, perfect.
Very good evening, ma'am. Is it fine now, I believe?
Yes, it's good, Mayank. We can hear you now without the echo.
Very good evening, ma'am. I, on the behalf of Executive Committee of Placement Assistance Council, would like to take this opportunity to thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule and enlightening us with your knowledge. Today's session gave us deep insights into fintech laws and its scope. And also, we would like to thank our teacher convener, Dr. Ruchita Chakrabarti ma'am, and all the fellow participants for being here and making this session interactive. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you, Alankruta. Thank you, everyone, for having me. It's a pleasure.